This video is part of a larger series of me watching every Studio Ghibli movie and talking about them, and today I watched Mononoke Hime, or Princess Mononoke, and spoiler warning. Jumping right into it, this movie is gorgeous, as Ghibli movies tend to be, but what I think it does better than pretty much every other film I've watched from this studio is the aesthetic design of the movie. I know that's a pretty vague description, but this is a difficult concept to put into words. Like, an example would be how nearly every film before Mononoke would take place on Earth, but it would add some weird magical element to it, whereas this movie clearly does not take place on Earth. It kinda has a stronger identity, if that makes sense. And I'm not just talking about the world design, I feel like this idea applies to the cultures presented in the film, the magic system, and how it works, etc. And I think this might be why Mononoke was so influential. But on the topic of this movie being influential, I was absolutely delighted to see where so many modern works have drawn inspiration from. Obviously, I noticed how the deer god is basically Xerneas from Pokemon X, but my favorite was definitely seeing all the inspiration that this movie provided to Breath of the Wild, which is probably my favorite video game. I mean, the similarities just go on, and I'm sure someone has made a video that does a better job than I could at listing them, but I would like to just specifically point out that the demon goop that gives Ashitaka the curse scar thing is clearly the inspiration for the Calamity Ganon goop from Breath of the Wild 2, as well as the fact that the green energy stuff in the trailer seems to like go into Link's right arm, so retroactively learning about what the sequel to one of the best games of all time might be about was pretty cool. One thing that this movie did really well was characterizing Ashitaka through his actions, basically the show don't tell rule. Pretty much everything we learn about his personality and what type of person he is comes first and foremost from his actions. They establish that Ashitaka is composed and stoic through the way he interacts with the members of his village. He's against violence and conflict but is willing to kill if necessary because he does exactly that. He only kills when necessary and he feels bad about it. He's a protector because he saves those two guys from the river. He values nature because he's polite to the tree spirit, children, things, etc, etc. And this doesn't just apply to Ashitaka, he's just the best example because he's the main character. This kind of storytelling is what kept the movie engaging the whole way through despite the nearly 2-hour runtime. I criticized Pompoko for not feeling like it justified its 2-hour runtime because it never spent that time getting me to care about any of the characters or progressing the main plot in a meaningful way, but Mononoke is the perfect example of doing that right. I wasn't bored once in my entire viewing experience, and that's actually a decently rare occurrence for someone like myself who finds it pretty difficult to stay focused on one thing at a time for extended periods of time. I guess I will say that although the movie was paced well for the narrative, it could have been paced better for the thematic message. Like, the character interactions and developments were interesting the entire way through, but once we learn that Eboshi is making guns to kill forest spirits, it becomes pretty obvious what the end game of the movie is gonna be. The old humans are destroying the environment through industrialization and we should try to live in harmony with nature message. And the film handles it well, I just think that maybe more could have been done to make it interesting. I'd recommend having Eboshi convince Ashitaka that the industrialization was a good thing, and then slowly have Ashitaka realize that Eboshi was wrong through meeting and learning about San and the other animals. Cause like, Ashitaka is the viewer's moral compass, so as long as he makes it clear that he doesn't approve of Eboshi's gun making, you kinda get everything that the rest of the movie is gonna be in service of. Shifting gears, one thing that sets this movie way apart from past Ghibli works is that it's the first to place heavy emphasis on action. I guess an argument could be made that Castle in the Sky or Porco Rosso could also be considered action movies, but either way, I think it's pretty clear that Mononoke is on another level in this regard. I mention this because the strong suit in nearly all of Ghibli's movies thus far has been in their ability to create a captivating aesthetic, which Mononoke does successfully, but never before have they really focused on intensity, high energy, and momentum than in this movie. I absolutely loved watching San dart across rooftops and how her DPS fighting style sort of contrasts with Eboshi and Ashitaka's, and the sound effects that her dagger made whenever she swings it around, oh my god, it was so satisfying! Sound effects in general were great as well, the cocking and firing of the guns, the arrows flying through the air, the Deer King's pond of life or whatever, it's all very sonically pleasing. And on that note, the voice acting was also great, though I didn't feel like any of the music was particularly memorable, but music being memorable isn't primarily its goal, it's more to enhance the tone of the scene that it's being played over, so I guess that could even be seen as to its credit. One thing I found especially interesting as I made it to the end of this viewing experience was the characters, particularly the main three, Ashitaka, San, and Eboshi. Like I talked about earlier, I feel like the characterization of each of them was done very well and organically, but when it came to actually developing those characters, it felt like they didn't really know what to do. Like, San befriends Ashitaka, which makes sense considering he's basically the only human she's ever met that doesn't actively want her and the forest dead, but then the end of the movie just has her stay in the forest and Ashitaka says that he'll visit her. This is one of the few moments where the movie breaks the show don't tell rule. Ashitaka simply saying that he intended to visit San is a lot less gratifying than actually seeing them spend time together in a more normal setting than what happens in the events of the movie. I was a little surprised that we didn't get anything like the epilogue sequence from Kiki's Delivery Service here, because this movie felt practically perfect for it. Anyways, Ashitaka also didn't really feel like he came to any big revelations. He was just right all along about how humans and nature should and can live together in peace and harmony, and I already went over the changes I would make to that story, just to make it a little more engaging. Eboshi is the big one though. The whole movie she's talking about her plans to revolutionize humanity and kill the deer god, and the entire time I'm thinking, she's obviously wrong. If you kill the deer god, bad stuff is gonna happen for everyone. But then she kills the deer god, or shoots off his head or whatever, and bad stuff happens for everyone. Then Eboshi's just like, huh, I guess I was wrong. And like, presumably she just keeps leading her village, same as always, except now they're all good people who don't destroy nature. I think what bugs me about her is that it doesn't really feel like she takes the climax of the film very seriously, and so when she changes her ideology at the end of the movie, it kind of feels like she wasn't that determined to kill the deer god in the first place. And this is only amplified by the fact that she basically suffers no consequences for her actions. Like, yeah, she loses an arm, but even that she doesn't seem to mind that much. It's like even the main protagonist isn't that invested in the outcome of the narrative, despite being the driving force in the conflict. Honestly, these whole characterization tidbits that I'm going on about aren't really that big of a deal, they just kinda confused me. My criticisms aside, I liked this movie a whole lot, and for every one issue that I had with it, there were probably 2 other things that I liked about it, and I can't complain about that. Anyway, let me know what you thought about Princess Mononoke down in the comments, assuming you're watching these movies along with me, or that you had already seen this film. Tune in to the next installment of Watching Every Ghibli Movie, wherein I will be watching Tonari no Yamada-kun, or My Neighbors the Yamadas. But with that said, have a wonderful day, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.